Hi guys, and welcome to my ultimate backpacking Egypt recap, coming from a solo female traveler. I will tell you all you need to know before going, from my itinerary, the cost, the things I did and didn't like, and just anything I feel like you should know before going to Egypt. I'm going to start with some general information and things that you can do before even going to Egypt to make your trip even better. For most people, the main reason to visit Egypt is its incredible history. All the way from the First Dynasty, about 5,000 years ago, or even before that, up until the Greco-Roman period, then the Byzantine and even the Ottoman Empire, up until even Napoleon. The history is so rich and so long that it can be very difficult to grasp. At least that's what I found. In the description below, I will make a list of podcasts that you can listen to before or even during your trip, just to make it all make a little bit more sense. Even though you can do tours with Egyptologists as your guide, sometimes I felt like they left me with more questions than answers. Through listening to these podcasts, I learned more about the rulers, about the belief systems, pretty much anything related to ancient Egyptian history, which made the visits to these tombs and these temples all the more impressive, eventually even seeing the royal mummies and going face to face with these absolute legends is just so much more impressive if you know who they are. So if you want to do some research or some learning even throughout the trip, I will link them in the description below. Something else that is super duper useful that you can do before going on your trip is learn the Arabic numbers. Just from 0 to 9. A friend who I met even had them like on the back of her phone. Just the numbers, because when you arrive in Egypt, you will quite probably take an Uber. You will need to be able to decipher the license plate. When you take a bus, you have to be able to recognize which seat you would be on. And if you're lucky, a shop might actually have prices noted, so you will be able to read them. Other than that, it is completely possible to travel Egypt without learning any Arabic. Pretty much everyone I met spoke English, or at least some English, which I was very impressed about. Not even in Turkey did they have the level of English that they had in Egypt. But if you do decide that you want to learn Arabic, then Egypt is the place to be, because Egypt has a very big film and TV scene, which a lot of the Arabic world actually watches, which means that the Egyptian Arabic is the most commonly understood among the other Muslim countries. So if you do want to learn some Arabic, this is a place to be. Nowadays, Egypt is a Muslim country, although back in the day with the Egyptians, they had many different gods, and also the Christians came through Egypt and settled there. Eventually now it is a Muslim country, which has a few consequences. Friday is actually their Sunday. So their first day of the weekend will be Friday, and on Friday they will go into the mosque for an extended amount of time. Like usually it's about 2 hours that the prayer around midday lasts. So you will find a lot less people in the streets, a lot less shops will be open, which is a good time to actually visit places like the pyramids, because there will be less people trying to sell you a camel ride or anything like that, just less hassle. And it's just something to take into account. You will definitely notice this. Of course, you will hear the call to prayer around sunrise and sunset and in between, but especially around sunrise and sunset. Maybe you will hear it if your hotel or your room is quite close to the mosque. It didn't personally bother me, but I can imagine that maybe if you are really next to it, it might wake you up. But I was fine throughout the journey. Also, alcohol is very scarcely available. It just is not as much of a thing. You can find alcohol. They do have Stella, beers, etc. But you can't get them anywhere. Only very limited places or like bars will sell alcohol. Even in restaurants, it's not very common, but I heard that there is an app called Drinkies, and you can pretty much deliver alcohol to wherever you are, even your accommodation or even the restaurant that you are eating at. I personally didn't do this for the majority of like more than a month. I only had one drink because it was offered to me by someone, but other than that, I didn't really go looking for it. I didn't really miss it either. And then aside from that, dress modestly. A lot of the women, even the men, they are completely covered up. If you want to see what I packed and what I wish I had packed, I have made a separate video about this, so you can go and check it out already. But yeah, they do appreciate it if you try and dress modestly. I'm not saying it will make sure that you will be less harassed in the streets. I don't think that really matters much, but at least it's a bit more respectful of the culture. With this in mind, let's have a look at when you should go to Egypt. The high season or peak season is the winter months, December and January, because during this time, the temperatures in the Sahara Desert are simply the most enjoyable. But the shoulder season, October, November, and also February to April, are also a really good time to visit. It'll be less busy than the high season, but the temperatures are still fine. I must say, even though it was April to May even, it wasn't too hot. Like, yes, it's hot. Yes, you drink a lot. It was not by any means like the kind of heat, like the 40 degrees that I had in Central America. And that was a humid heat. Whereas Egypt is more of a dry heat, so it's just not as annoying and sticky. The summer will get very, very hot, but it is when all the sharks end up coming to Marsa Alam and the Red Sea. So if you want to see those, we will have to brave the heat. But it could also mean that you will have some discounts on packages or accommodation because it is less busy. Okay, now that you are prepared for the history, the language, the religion, and also know when to go, let's start talking about actually traveling. Entering the country is not too difficult. If you're from Europe and you're only going to the Red Sea, you will only need your national ID. You can stay up to 15 days with this one, and you will only stay in Hurghada, Sharm el-Sheikh, this area. If you want to travel around Egypt and get up to 30 days, then you will need your international passport. You can get a visa online and pay for it online already. I did this because if you want to get the visa on arrival, it'll take more time, but also you need to pay for it in dollars. It is $25 on arrival. And when arriving, you also need to fill out an immigration form. I was lucky that I already got it on the plane, so I could fill it out and go straight up to the counter with my passport, the immigration form, and my e-visa, and I was through in no time. For convenience and also safety reasons, I made sure that I had an eSIM downloaded. I could have just bought a SIM card upon arrival, and people who did this told me that they got 15 gigabytes and it wasn't too expensive. I believe they paid 300 Egyptian pounds, which is such a bargain. I definitely paid a bit more for a lot less gigabytes, but I made it work anyways, and I just find it a lot more useful to already have it downloaded as soon as I land in case I need to search for something or book a ride or just to avoid any scams pretty much. Anyway, let's have a look at where to go and some ideas for your itinerary. There are 4 main regions in Egypt. One being the Red Sea area, the second one obviously the Nile, then the Western Desert and the Northern Mediterranean. If you don't have much time, you will probably stick to the Nile region. But here is what I did, having 24 days in Egypt to travel all around and see pretty much, I think I've seen all of Egypt, except for maybe Hurghada, where I didn't really stay to like have a look around, but it's just resorts. I skipped the resorts, but I saw everything else that there was in Egypt. I had a bit of a strategy going on. I started in Dahab, so I flew to Sharm el-Sheikh. I took a 1-hour shuttle that the hostel arranged for me to Dahab, and I spent my first few days there, and it was so amazing. It got me used to the culture a bit. I met so many lovely people, especially people from Cairo, who I then would end up meeting later on. It was always my strategy to start with the less chaotic parts of Egypt and kind of work my way up, and also make sure that I had time to learn about the scams, meet the local people, so that eventually I had like the proper knowledge and the proper just network for like any issues that might arise. So that was my way of dealing with my safety in Egypt. Just start at the Red Sea and then slowly make my way up to Cairo. So from Dahab, I then took the transfer back to Sharm el Sheikh and took a flight to Hurghada because the ferry that goes between them is no longer going, unfortunately. So I had to fly, which I try to avoid usually, but it would have been a long drive from Dahab all the way to Cairo and then down to Hurghada. So I flew. Also because I was traveling with someone who didn't have much time. But from Hurghada, we went straight down to Marsa Alam. In Marsa Alam, they have some of the best diving in the Red Sea. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best season. But from Marsa Alam, I then took a go bus up to Safaga, and in Safaga, I transferred onto another go bus that went to Luxor. GoBus offers the most comfortable long-distance bus rides in Egypt. You can easily book them online, even through Want2Go Asia. If you want to have a look at other options, even the train, etc., you can look on Want2Go, and they also sell the transportation in Egypt. So sometimes if something wasn't available on the GoBus website, I looked on Want2Go and a specific time for the journey was available on there. So definitely check both if one or the other isn't really giving you what you're looking for. But anyway, I made it to Luxor with the Go Bus. Just make sure that if you do take a long distance bus that you have a sweater with you, because sometimes the AC can be so cold. Then from Luxor, I took a minibus or a micro van to Aswan, which is something that they don't like to allow foreigners to do. They prefer foreigners to take the much more expensive train. They don't have buses for some reason from Luxor to Aswan, only the minibuses, which you will pay quite a bit more for than the locals, but they don't always allow tourists on them. I got lucky, even though I was then stuck in a sandstorm for 3 hours, but it could be worse because my friend, he left right before me and their van broke down along the way and he only arrived 2 hours later. But anyway, I made it to Aswan. And in both Luxor and Aswan, you won't be able to use Uber. You can use InDrive or Karim. These are like similar transportation or taxi apps so that you pay a fair price. If you prefer to take the local transportation, then you can always try the minibuses. Both in Luxor and in Aswan, they have these mini vans moving through the cities. It's a bit tricky to find out what their destination or their route is, but they are very cheap. And if it's just like one straight line that you have to be on the bus for like a few hundred meters, you just don't want to walk in the heat, then it's a good option. I did a day trip from Aswan to Abu Simbel. It's just simply the most hassle-free option there is. And then from Aswan, to make your way back to Luxor or even to Cairo, there are a few different options. The train that I mentioned before, you need to pay in dollars. You need to pay it directly at the train station. There is no online platform that you can book the tickets through yet. Online, it does say that they are working on this, but as of now, it's not possible. So it's a bit tricky to find the right train at the right time. You need to book it a bit in advance if you want the right time, and you need to have dollars on you to book it. It's also just really expensive. Whereas the bus, for example, from Luxor to Cairo cost me €5 for 11 hours. This train of 13 hours will cost you about 100. At least. It's like between $90 to $130. So that's a huge difference. To get from Aswan back to Luxor, I opted for the cruise, which I loved and adored. Definitely check out the separate video I made about it. You can opt for either a 2-night or a 4-night cruise. In Cairo, you can use Uber, in Alexandria as well, and between Cairo and Alexandria, you can just take a regular Go bus. It's only a few hours away, but I decided that I also wanted to go to the Siwa Oasis. And for this, I had to go with a different bus company. And in the Siwa video, I explain like where to get the ticket. But this West Delta bus company took me from Cairo to Siwa, and then from Siwa to Alexandria. And then from Alexandria, I took the Go bus back. and the white desert that I visited all the way at the end of my trip, which I'm so glad I finished with it because it was just one of the best things I've ever done anywhere. That is simply an overnight trip that you can do from Cairo, and I loved it so much. So that was my itinerary and how I got around Egypt. It is so much easier than I expected before taking off. Now let's have a look at how much it cost me and how much I spent in total. When it comes to money, the currency in Egypt is the Egyptian pound. They have very few places that you can pay by card, so you definitely need to take out money. The best ATMs to use are the Banque Misr, simply because they don't charge the extra ATM fees. And if you want to lower your ATM fees even more, you can get a travel card like Revolut or Monzo, because these will bring your costs down even more. And I would definitely recommend having some dollars on you. I had $100 with me, and it would have been useful to pay for the visa on arrival, for the train in case I did want to take it, but also, for example, the cruise. All of a sudden, someone had come to the hostel, they were selling the cruise pretty cheap. My friends and I decided we wanted to do it, but we had to pay it then and there. And luckily, I still had this $100 stashed away somewhere. Let's have a look at what money can get you in Egypt. In March, there was a huge devaluation of the Egyptian pound, which has made the euro and the dollar in comparison a lot stronger. This meant that it was more affordable for me to travel to Egypt right now. But don't be fooled, you will still be spending more than the locals because nothing ever seems to have a fixed price. And they are definitely upcharging the non-locals. Especially going into a shop, I found this very intimidating and stressful because I was just always expecting a negotiation or a discussion about the price, and just not knowing what something actually costs is just stresses me out. So if you are buying a small bottle of water, expect £5, a big bottle of water, £10, a can of soda, £12, a small bag of crisps, £10. So if you need to get a snack along the way, just keep these prices in the back of your mind. This is in April, May of 2024, so the prices could change, but just so you know, these should be the prices. And at least you'll be able to buy a snack or a drink without too much stress. Now let's see what I spent on my 24 days in Egypt. In total, I spent 1,850 euros for my 24 days in Egypt, but I've done it all. I have gone free diving for 100 euros. It includes 3 flights, my flight from Turkey to Sharm el-Sheikh, my flight from Cairo home, which is 250, and a 90 euro flight from Sharm el-Sheikh to Hurghada. And then of course I have done some dives. I spent 250 euros on dives, 60 euros on swimming with the dolphins, $100 on the 2-night cruise, $75 on the overnight to the White Desert, which I made a deal for because they were asking 90 as well. Then some smaller tours of like 30 euros, sometimes 15 euros. And of course, all the entrance fees to all these incredible sites. I expected to spend at least like 100 euros on entrance fees in Cairo and then another 100 in Luxor, which was not the case at all. The most expensive entry was the Grand Egyptian Museum, which was an absolute scam. Don't go before it's open, because I paid 20 euros to enter and there was nothing still. Aside from that, the pyramids were a bit more than 10 euros to enter. The 2 temples along the Nile cruise, just 16 euros. The Valley of the Kings was £600, an extra 500 for King Tut, and then we arranged a private guide which we split between the 2 of us, so 750 each. So the prices really for all the other visits were acceptable. Like, they were acceptable prices. I've been able to do so much for the amount of money that I spent. There used to be a Luxor and Cairo pass that kind of included all the sites, but since the devaluation, it's actually much cheaper to buy the entrances separately, so they do not advertise those Cairo or Luxor passes anymore. And also it's not at all even available or offered. So yeah, none of that. Aside from the activities, of course, there is also accommodation. I stayed mostly in hostels, but sometimes I did stay in a private a guest house because there simply wasn't a hostel, for example, in Siwa or in Marsa Alam. So I spent less than 10 euros on a dorm room and about 20 euros per night for a private room, which is still very affordable. Flights can be pretty cheap, like I said, sometimes cheaper than taking the train. A long distance bus costs anything between 5 euros to 10 euros, and a taxi ride is usually less than 2 euros. Accommodation is usually cheaper when you book directly, but sometimes for convenience I still use Hostelworld. I definitely saved money because I didn't take guides when visiting all the sites, because I was listening to these podcasts and already gathered a lot of information through those. And there are still signs on site also that give you a lot of information as well. I didn't have any trouble bringing my camera into all the sites. I expected that I would have to pay extra to bring my camera, but these days with everyone having such a great phone, I think there's just no way they can control that anymore, so they didn't ask me any extra money for my camera. Although I wasn't able to bring it into the Grand Egyptian Museum for some reason. Food in Egypt was definitely the most affordable. I spent about 5 euros per day on food, simply because my accommodation often included a great Egyptian breakfast. So I would have the breakfast and then I would have one big proper meal per day, which cost me about 4 to 5 euros, sometimes less. And then that would fill me up so much. And because of the heat, you don't have much of an appetite. Your stomach is filled with a lot of water all the time as well. So I found that I wasn't eating that much and I wasn't definitely not spending much on food at all. In total, excluding the flights, I spent 60 euros per day, which for Egypt and with the amount of things I've done is definitely good value for money. Also, a lot of people will expect you to tip. Even people who don't do anything will ask you for a tip. For example, now we are getting into the scammy parts of Egypt, which I don't like talking about too much because in the 24 days of being in Egypt, I was not scammed. It is just people trying to make money, guys. So people even at temples or places, they will be like, oh, come this way. This is a great picture. Like, I can take your picture here. And then they will want like £5 or something for this, which is 10 cents. There are kids selling bracelets, which again, I don't like giving money to kids at all, because then they will stay out of school. They will make you pay to like take a shortcut. Like they will build a fence that you will have to walk around, and then they will have a gate to open to like literally have a 200-meter shortcut for £5, just for like a little tip. Like, oh, come through here. It's the length people in Egypt go through for a tip. It's impressive, and I respect them for it. I do not judge them for it. I respect the hustle. What I don't respect is the harassment in Luxor, especially, was terrible. I like to walk because it brings me through local streets, seeing the baker, the butcher, I love that. But walking through Luxor, every minute there was another person, especially the horse carriages. They would stop and they would say, no, the road is closed there. You can't pass through there. You can't go there. I know the way. I will bring you for only £50. I can take you to the entrance, blah, blah, blah. If you end up ignoring them or you're not paying attention to them, they will start catcalling. They will start saying just rude, inappropriate things. And this is what I found like all throughout Luxor. I walked for 1 hour from the Karnak temple back to the hostel, passing by the Luxor temple, walking along the Nile, and just every step of the way there was another person chatting, trying to sell something or catcalling or just being freaking annoying. And that is the kind of harassment, like the constant, yeah, it was very annoying, especially in Luxor. And I hate the horse carriages. I hate you guys for using these animals in this heat and for catcalling women, even with women in the back of your cars, just being freaking rude and annoying and with the smelly shit everywhere. I hate it. I hate it. Take away the horse carriages in Luxor. Aside from that, guys, barking dogs don't bite. So as long as they kept their distance and all they used was words, I just kept ignoring it and I was fine. I tried to focus on all the beauty of Egypt. And aside from this, all the people I got in touch with along the way were absolutely incredible. Like, I was treated like an Egyptian queen by the locals. Everyone welcomed me with open arms. They helped me wherever they could. I have nothing but respect for the Egyptian people, and I really hope to go back soon because I made a lot of great friends. Oh, and there's a thing they do with money. Like, they will have lots of coins. Like, for example, people in toilets, they will have euro coins or pound coins or like just small money. And they will ask you if you have bigger bills because a bigger bill is worth more when they exchange it than the smaller money. When they ask you this, it's not really a scam. It's just a way for them to make money or like more money out of what they have gotten already. It's not really a scam. So it's up to you if you decide to give them like a bill and take the coins in return. And of course, unfortunately, it is still a developing country, which means that trash is still everywhere. Like, recycling and respect for the environment is still not really there. So you will have to look past all the trash in the streets. You're a driver in the middle of the desert throwing out his trash. You can obviously speak to them about it, but it's a difference in culture still and a difference in education, and there is a lot of trash in the streets, a lot of dog poo also from the dogs in the streets, a lot of horse poo from the horse carriages. So it is kind of dirty, I'm not gonna lie. So you do have to just prepare yourself for this and try not to be bothered by it too much. If you want to know what to bring on your trip to Egypt, like the essentials, aside from clothes, etc., do check out my unpacking video that I made for Egypt, just so that you are prepared for the dust, the thirst, everything. I go through everything. I will tell you all about that in that video. Up next, I'll be making a video about safety and, as a solo female traveler, how I make sure that I stay safe and healthy throughout all my trips from Honduras to Egypt. How do I make sure that I stay safe as a solo female woman traveling? So if you don't want to miss any of the upcoming videos, definitely subscribe and hit the notification bell. And then I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!